All right. Well, good morning and welcome to this month's episode of Reframing the Image of Relationships. My name is Dwayne Dwyer. I go by the Mindset Coach, and I am joined by Miss Lisa Keys, the voice of reason, and Miss Nodella Sacagawea Jordan, the optimizer. That said, ladies, good morning on this beautiful Saturday morning. How are you guys doing?
Good
Good
morning. Good
morning.
morning.
I'm doing great.
Good, good, good. Glad to hear that.
Good.
And as always, it is an honor to be in this conversation with you guys. It's an honor to kind of again get to the point to where we're talking about relationships, where we get the opportunity to kind of challenge, the perspective of how we view relationships. But I think it's also just as it is an honor to share in conversation with you guys, it is also an honor to share in conversations with what we tend to call the livest chat in social media because you guys are a functional part of our conversation. So that being said, I would like to say personally, good morning, Nick D. Good morning, Crystal Everett. Good morning, His Divine Appointment, Miss Charlotte Jordan. Good to see you and welcome. And anybody out there, whether you're in YouTube, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on Instagram, it doesn't really matter. Just get in the chat. Let us know that you're here because on this channel we like to acknowledge you by name. Because again, I don't think we do enough of that. I don't think we do enough of that in our community. So we want to acknowledge you and welcome you here because on this beautiful Saturday morning, you can be anyplace else, but you're here with us and we do not take that lightly. So again, just let us know that you're there so that we can address you by name. So it's been a whole month, actually a month and a week, if I'm being honest, because this month was a little elongated, if you will, since we've gotten together. So, how's everything going? Like, what's changed? What's new in the life of Lisa Keys and Miss Nodella Sacagawea Jordan?
Well, for me, I'm just recovering from my fifth ankle surgery, but all is well. I'm ready to get back out there and start doing what I do. But yeah, I just kind of been taking it easy in these past couple of months, recovering from that, and then just trying to get some rest and relaxation in because the early part of my year was very busy with ministry. So, and of course, I'm always looking forward to our conversations.
Absolutely. Well, I pray that you have a speedy recovery after that ankle surgery. Lisa, how about you? What's new with you?
He keeps teaching me, and I'm excited about that. Even in this discussion that we're going to be having this morning, I'm excited to share some of the things that God is teaching us. So, anything new, brand new mercies every day. That's it.
That's it. It's always good to be in a space of learning, and that's one of the reasons why I enjoy our conversations, because it keeps us in a heart posture of learning. Sure, we know some things, right? But I think it's okay for us to realize that even though we know some things, we don't necessarily know everything there is to know. And so that kind of changes the complexity of our posture and kind of softens our stance when we have conversations. Michelle Payne Aiken, good to see you and welcome to today's conversation.
Hey,
Um,
cousin.
so, so that being said, unless there's anything else that we need to discuss, we're going to go ahead and get started. Have you ever met someone and felt an instant magnetic connection? It's almost like souls recognize each other. What if that spark isn't random, but rooted in three hidden triggers our brain used to create emotional chemistry? Today, we're breaking down the science of connection, why we gravitate to specific people, how neurotransmitters like dopamine hijack our decisions, and why some bonds fizzle while others evolve into unshakable partnerships. You'll learn to spot the biological blueprint behind attraction and unlock a simple, actionable hack to transform fleeting sparks into lasting flames. No cliches, just neuroscience and proven strategies. Stay until the end because what you might discover might actually rewrite how you approach every relationship in your life. So let's begin. Now, I'm gonna kind of let you guys in on a little secret. Some people, it might be a shock to learn this, and some people it may not. You know what I'm saying? But I really do like Christmas movies, and I know some people like, really, you like Christmas? I like the movies, right? I'm saying it takes place during my favorite time of year, right? The season, not the holiday. But I like the movies because the movies tend to follow kind of like a specific trend. And that trend is it's during that season. A lot of times it includes some snow, which I like looking at snow. I don't like being in it, right? But then it's always a discovery of a romantic connection. Now, I think in some of our minds, we believe that that, in essence, is like should be our reality. And I think, I don't know. Is well, before I go there, like, does anybody else here like Christmas movies? I want to ask that. I'm just curious now.
Christmas
I
in July.
do.
You said what now?
Christmas in July. They got a lot of movies that I start watching.
Oh my God.
Likewise on YouTube, I'm a lot of them are coming up in my news feed. And we talked a little bit just briefly a while ago. I find them, although they're meant to have some sense of romanticism in it, I find them, a lot of them, very funny. I be sitting, in my recliner, cracking up. I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not gonna lie. Like again, and I'm with Crystal. I don't like all of them. I like some of them, right? And I remember one time, like, what does this really say about me? Like, yeah, but long story anyway. But the whole point for me is like, and last tidbit before we continue. My favorite Christmas movie though is Die Hard. Die Hard is the best Christmas movie of all times. But that trend, that kind of fantastical idea of getting into this connection with this person, like it wasn't intentional. Going back to that notion, it wasn't intentional. It was just something that happened, and it's almost like a romantic fantasy, if you will. And I think a lot of times we tend to fall into that trap, believing that that's how life is going to happen to us. Like we'll run across this person and it's like, oh my God, I did not see that person coming, or that person is always there. And somebody's like, you don't see her, you don't see him. Like, how are you overlooking that person? So I think it's a very interesting thing. So that said, I really want to start off by asking a particular question. And this isn't a planned question. This is just a question that I just thought of during this conversation. Like, why is it that when you have this instant connection with this person, it may feel like fate, but a lot of times it turned into some type of regret at a later point in time? Why do you think that is?
When I read the question, immediately I thought about Adam and Eve, how God put those two together. And so we can look at that as the ideal of the start of a successful relationship. But because of, a number of events that took place, today we're now somewhat forced with navigating through what does relationship look like for me with the opposite sex. Now, we do have the word of God that serves as our manual. But again, when we look at Adam and Eve, they didn't have to deal with a lot of the ebbs and flows of our ideas of what relationship looks like today. I thought about the verse of scripture where Adam says that Eve is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And, while there's somewhat of a debate about, as believers, should we believe in soul ties? I do believe in soul ties based on that, because we understand the soul is tied to the flesh. So for me, I think that we can get too much in the flesh where our emotions also, we're visual individuals, we're visual human beings, and that does govern a lot of our decisions when it comes to relationships, and not just the romantic relationships, platonic friendship as well.
So I think I just wanted to restate the question. The question you were asking is, how does it when you initially meet someone and you think it's fate, but then over time you discover that it's not, right? I think in part that is because of this fantastical image that is given to us as young children, or how we are instructed that quote unquote love happens, right? In part, I think that's part of it, because we always talk about this, and I think it's important for us to always continue to state it. The girls were taught about princesses and tea parties and making mud pies. That's what we were taught. I'm just saying, in my particular era, we had the little easy bake oven. We did those too, right? But then I remember my brothers being brought up, and they were taught about, this is my era, so I may be telling my age. They did the cowboys and Indians and the different things. So the era of my children was the more so the Disney, princesses and things of that nature. But I think in part that has had such a big influence in the mindsets of individuals when it comes to entering a relationship, because they think that that's the image that they've had, and that's what they've been told that relationship looks like. So I think that when we meet someone and we were like, but this is exactly, the person that I thought, we had this immediate connection. But it's more than just you having this immediate connection. Connection is good, but then what else is there? So that's my response.
I love those responses, and I agree. I think to kind of, and I don't think my response is any different than the both of your responses. I think it's just like a different version of it, if you will. And it kind of sounds a lot like what Miss Charlotte Jordan said. I don't believe that, number one, the connection is rooted in anything solid. Like, sure, that instant spark was there, but then what happened afterward? Did we just bask in the feeling of the emotions, or did we become intentional about building something that's on solid ground, or is it something that we just placed in the sand and then let the water wash it away? And I think a lot of that happens, because again, everybody has their own personal preference, and I'm not here to say what somebody's preference is right or wrong. That's their choice, and sometimes that kind of leads into that spark, and sometimes it's just the the connection between the two people. And I think, to me, the connection is probably more important than the superficial aspects of what the eye can actually see. And so I'm glad you guys said what you said, because I think what we're going to continue to unpack becomes a little bit more revealing. So the first section I want to talk about is kind of like the concern, and the concern leads to a comparison between hope and reality. And sometimes, like I was saying, what we hope for was never promised to us. That's number one. And because it was never promised to us, there's no guarantee of that coming to pass. And a lot of what we hope was generated in our own psyche without any roots. And then when reality sets in, it's like, oh my goodness, I did not know. Well, the signs were there, you just ignored it. And so the statistical fact that goes along with this is that 70% of singles admit they prioritize surface level excitement over core values, leaving them emotionally stranded. And I think that's an alarming number, but I also think that this number is a little jaded, and I think it might be a lot more than just 70%. So, the first question I want to ask you guys in relation to that is, why does prioritizing instant chemistry often sabotage the deeper connection we truly crave?
I'll start. Um, Love, right? When I think about love, of course, with my new perspective and understanding, so we know God is love, right? And love seeks the good in others, I would say. And it goes beyond initial feelings. So there's this commitment that we're making, right? And that doesn't mean that only when it feels good. It doesn't mean only when it feels good, because we made a commitment. So that means that sometimes it's not going to be pleasant, or you're not going to be happy. There sometimes there'll be, um, joy will be absent, in some of those instances, but it doesn't have to stay that way. So I think that when we get into the chemistry of being in a relationship, we think it's all going to be flowers and roses, and we're connecting, and we think it's always going to be this way. And initially, you have that stage where you enter into a relationship, is what we call the honeymoon phase, and then we think that's going to be for the duration of the relationship, and it's not. It was a thing that helped you to connect, but then there's so much more that has to be built upon in order for it to be sustainable. And so I think that chemistry, if you're focused on chemistry, it can cloud discernment. I'll say that.
Okay.
So I don't mean to sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but I have to keep going back to the flesh, because we are in the flesh and we forget that our original identity is actually in the spiritual realm. And so we tend to cater more to the fleshly desires than the spirit. And by doing that, we become, caught up in this thing. Oh, we got chemistry. So yesterday, and I didn't even realize some of these questions were. So yesterday, I decided to, watch a movie on YouTube, and it was about this girl who dreamt about having the perfect wedding. And to, the Voice of Reason's point, as little girls, talked about how that's all she thought about. And she really became obsessed with it. So she's in this relationship with this guy for, I think, like 7 years now. And there was no mention of getting married on the horizon. So she decided to go to a dating site, and there was, she decided to do the speed dating. So a guy approached her saying, hey, my boss is looking for a wife, because in order for him to inherit his wealth, he had to get married. So she entertained, she was like, okay, I'll go with it. But his assistant, going back to that chemistry, there was this spark there, because he started talking about all the things that she was desiring from her future husband, but yet she had a boyfriend that she ended up dumping. She was in this contractual soon to be marriage. And so you want to talk about chemistry. It ended up being a hot mess, but I share that just to show, in terms of when we focus on chemistry alone, it does set us up to where we end up sabotaging a potential meaningful relationship. So at the end of the movie, long story short, she ended up with the guy's assistant because he spoke to what it is that she desired. And so I share that point, as well as that it's fine to have that chemistry, but that chemistry is not what's going to get you through those tough moments in that relationship, in that marriage. And so you have to identify, as, again, the Voice of Reason, even pointed out, is we now got to get down to the nitty gritty and start having, as we talked about before, these difficult conversations of what are we looking for in this relationship. You talked about the expectation. And we all come to a relationship with expectations, but are your expectations the same? And oftentimes we'll say, like, she was in this relationship with this guy for 7 years, and she kept pushing off what she really expected from the relationship, living in this fantasy world of, well, he'll eventually come around. Well, he only came around when she moved on to this contractual marriage. So was there any validity or legitimacy in the relationship? And she reconsidered reconnecting with him. And so we just have to look at, okay, we have chemistry. And chemistry for me, oftentimes we look at the superficial stuff. Okay, he or she is nice looking. They got the bod that I want. Their income is decent. You know, I can live with that. You know, he seems to, or she seems to have a nice personality. But we do, again, have to go deeper than that, because we are not creatures of the flesh. Our true identity is wrapped up in the spirit, and we're always going to be unsatisfied when it comes to just pleasing the flesh rather than the spirit, man.
Yeah, but and that last part you said, Michelle Payne said something very similar to that, about our lustful nature. You know, our lustful nature can be very powerful and very deceiving. She's absolutely right. I think a lot of these things that we call chemistry are the goals that we place in our head. And then when we see a person, they kind of connect with the goals that we have in our head. And then that's the instant spark. And I speak from a man's perspective, because I'm sure all of y'all wasn't saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Spirit your whole life. So some of y'all remember Sir Mix-a-Lot when he made that song, "Given the Dimensions of a Woman." And a lot of dudes used to walk around singing that. That's what they wanted, right? And so if they didn't meet this criteria, then that person isn't for me. And again, I mean, this isn't buildabear.com, but I mean, that's kind of like how some people behave. And so they put these things in their head, and then that becomes like their goal when it comes down to it. So in essence, they reduce relationship down to goal setting. And so they set goal for people, and then they find people who line up with their goal, and then poof, chemistry. So I think that's the thing, how it really happens. And unfortunately, that thing in that moment, it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like when me going and buying a car. Like when I get excited, if I'm being honest, because the car buying process for me is exciting. I do some research, I go online, I look at it, then I build it, and things of that nature. And then when I go to the car lot, I know exactly what I'm going for. So the car lot, the salesman, his job is really boring, because she don't get to walk me around the car lot and show me all these great and wonderful. I didn't come here for that. I came here for one thing and one thing only. Do you have it? Yes or no? Because if the answer is no, I'm leaving. Well, that's how we do relationships a lot of time. I came here for one thing and one thing only. Do you have it? Yes or no? If not, I'm leaving. And we got to really get out of that, because simple that simple notion of what you want from a person, out of a person, equates to the expectation. But the true expectation that I should be having in relationship is this person. I should have an expectation of my behavior on how I show up in relationship, because at the end of the day, when it comes down to working out your own soul saving salvation, the only responsibility metric in that, when it comes down to our connection, is me. So now the only expectation I have is in me. And then when we do connect, now it's on a different level. And I'll talk more in detail about that. I love what Nick D said here. Nick D said instant chemistry a lot of times is just temporary infatuation. Once newness wears off and reality is shown, feelings, thoughts may change. Same thing with buying that car. What happens when the first time you got to go to the car lot and leave it in the car lot for 7 days? I'm talking my experience, y'all. Don't judge me. You got to take it back to the car lot and leave it there for 7 days, because they got to rebuild the rear end. Do not conflate those two together, please, and thank you. They got to rebuild the rear end of the vehicle, right? I had to leave it there for 7 days. Like, I don't know. I was feeling some type of way, but I had to get it done for the vehicle. It's the exact same thing with those fleeting emotions and infatuations. And I love his divine appointments point about the initial spark or chemistry we often look for can sometimes get in the way of more meaningful connection. I think that is so true when it comes down to connecting with people who have the same belief system. It's not that we just simply believe the thing, but it's how much of that do you really believe and you actually live for yourself. Just because I said, oh yes, Christ is my Lord and my Savior. Okay, sounds great. Now I need to be able to identify that in your behavior. Lisa, go ahead. I think you're about to say something.
I was just going to really add to what you just said. That was actually my point. We're seeking we're seeking to connect with that moral, looking for moral indicators, right? For what we believe. Like, we're looking for integrity, humility, kindness, self-control. Those are some of the characters that we should look at, but they get pushed aside for the chemistry, for the feel good, for the Sir Mix-a-Lot and the Commodores. So they get pushed aside because that is what we are taught that we should look for. Music and media has a big influence on so many people and how they think a mate should look, but then they leave out the aspects of how do we connect beyond the superficial looks, the adrenaline, the novelty of what I have this image in my mind. And then when you find out that if you spend enough time, like you say often that your grandmother says, give time, you will learn that run the quickest that you can from this individual because there's no substance, there's no understanding. You will begin to see that you guys don't connect. So I think it's so important that we're not led by chemistry, but we're led by the standards that the Word of God is teaching us and how we should be in relationship. And sometimes because of what we've seen in the media, that way is not appealing to us because it requires us to not make us the focus.
Yeah, I agree. I'll also add one other piece. There are times when you need to run. Like, do not stay in a place that is physically abusive. I do not condone that whatsoever. But there are times where you want to run and you shouldn't run because you might learn something about yourself. You ain't as great as you thought you were. You ain't as perfect as everybody was telling you your whole entire life. Everybody comes into a situation with flaws. The relationship is the perfect training ground if you allow it to be so. I believe wholeheartedly that a lot of us go into a relationship thinking that we are a complete product. Wrong. That is the most incorrect thought that you could have ever had in 2025. And whenever that thought began in your mind, no one goes into a relationship a completed product. If you have the ability to stay there and be uncomfortable and allow like teaching to happen, learning and growth to actually happen, I think you'll find that not only was that the right choice for you, but you will find that that relationship now is elevating you to where you can be a useful product for the Most High. So I just kind of wanted to add that to what you were saying, Lisa, because I think you're so right. Sister Nadell, do you have anything else before we move on to the next one?
No, I'm loving where this conversation is going.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. We're going to skip the next question because I think we already touched on that one. And I kind of want to start with the trigger. So the first trigger here is mirrored vulnerability. And I think we'll love where this part here is going. Sparks feel magical when vulnerability flows mutually. Failures arise when one person overshares, or what we tend to call trauma dumping, while the other person deflects. I'm fine. So statistically speaking, 81% of failed relationships cite emotional inequality, according to the Journal of Social Psychology. So I just want to kind of throw something out there. The first question for here, and I think this includes an assumption, and if we can agree to this assumption, then we can proceed. And that assumption is vulnerability is the gateway to trust. So the more vulnerable a person becomes, the more you get to the point that you can actually view that person as being trustworthy. Okay, I see two head nods. So great. So if vulnerability is the gateway to trust, why do we often fear imbalance?
Because we're looking for perfection.
Mm.
And it does not exist in a relationship. There is no perfect relationship. As you just mentioned, we're talking about in any relationship, there should always be space for growth and for development, for learning. But we put our best foot forward, or many people put their best foot forward. I don't. And I'll leave that for a side note. Okay, Coach. Since you're laughing, I'll just put this in there right quick. The reason why I say that, because we're talking about when we focused on chemistry, when we meet a person and we present this best version of ourselves. Well, let's be honest. Some mornings we get up, we're like, even me, I'm a naturally happy person now since, God really changed my life. But some mornings when I wake up, I'm like, this morning I woke up, I didn't know. I'm like, is today Saturday or Sunday? I was confused. Right. So I'm like, so I laid there and I went back to sleep, woke back up. I'm like, is today Saturday or Sunday? So when you have a person who may not be a morning person, how would you deal with that? Right. And so I say that we tend to put our best foot forward because most of us want that individual to see the best version of us, to keep them attracted and interested in us. But what happens when, I'm not saying show you the worst version of you, but let's just say a lesser best version of you. And I think when we start being transparent, which is tied into this vulnerability, by allowing them to see this is who you could potentially be inheriting. Are you ready to deal with my antics? I don't like drama, but I have my own drama with myself. Are you ready to deal with my own personal drama? Are you ready to deal with my pet peeves? And so it ushers in me being vulnerable, even being my true, authentic self. And like I said, I wouldn't advise presenting the worst possible scenario of how you could be, but just give them, maybe a little look into, well, some days, I can be a little off. Is that something you're willing to deal with? And so for me, I think we're caught up in bringing our best selves on the first date, first conversation, and presenting or having this false expectation of that even marriage is perfect. And we even see in scripture, no marriage was perfect, even in their best effort.
That's good.
I really did like this question, right? When you talked about vulnerability, right? So vulnerability, as I think you said, it grows trust, right?
Yes.
Okay. So then when we pair that with discernment and mutual respect, right? When we pair that with discernment and mutual respect, then there's another aspect that can help us to connect with each other in a way that may not have been available before, right? Because now we're thinking, we're taking our time, we're listening, and we're hearing what the individual is saying, we're asking questions, right? And that aspect of fear, like, it often signals there's a need for maybe some understanding and boundaries. And so that's what I was thinking about. And then I think we talked about this before, right? The unequal vulnerability in how the dynamics can be created, right? Well, one person is bearing more of the emotional weight, and then they're leading, and they're manipulating, and then there becomes burnout, and then there's coercion, and then there's this needy behavior. So all those different things that come into play when fear is there, there's no boundaries, and we have not taken the time to really unpack what we say what we're going to do. Why are we coming together? What is the purpose of this coming together? And so I think all those things happen when I read this question. If vulnerability is the gateway to trust, why do we often fear imbalance? And all those things we have to unpack, right? I know we talked about I want to restate the unequally being vulnerable to each other is important, because then if we don't, then there's this room for that manipulation. And those are some of the things that I'm learning, of course, later on in life, but I think it's so important. And I can provide you with some scriptures if you need them to validate some of these things that I'm saying when it pertains to relationships, because relationship is relationship. We can't separate them, and they all have this same component. We need We need to communicate with each other. We need to listen to each other, respect each other, and we're there to be helpers to one another. So that's what relationship, some of the aspects of relationship, but we don't look at it that way. A lot of times we look at it as if I'm entering into a relationship because this is what I want, because you fit the ideal in my head. And then we see how that can turn out, that 70% that I mentioned.
Yeah. I think there's a very interesting dichotomy that exists because in the space of our work environment, we understand that when it comes down to leadership, and we go through all different types of leadership training, and we talk about, a trustworthy leader is a one that is transparent. So leaders disseminate information, as much information that they have their subordinates. And if they don't have all the information, they're transparent about that, saying more to follow or something of that nature. We talk about servant leadership, where leaders recognize that they're there to serve the people that work for them, and provide the necessary resources available, to help them be the best versions of themselves. And I think the issue there is that that information never leaks over into the space of interpersonal relationships. And so, because we may have been scarred before, because we were probably raised in an environment that says, well, I need to get you before you get me. We have this competitive mentality in our head. Then I am not going to be vulnerable to you until I see that you have the ability to be vulnerable to me first. And that is totally opposite of what relationship is all about. Again, going back to the whole work setting. In the work setting, we have a notion that says leaders do it first. And that's one of the things that we train. But in the interpersonal relationship setting, we'll say, no, you do it first. And if you give 50%, I give 50%. If you give 75%, I give 75%. You give 100%, then I give 100%. But your scale is a little off because your scale only works to the advantage of you. It doesn't work to the advantage of the relationship. So in essence, what ends up happening is that you become the recipient of all the goodness in the relationship, and the other person becomes the recipient of all the trash that you give them. And then if they don't receive it, now they're whatever version of an adjective that you want to tie to their name, because that's just how you see them at this point in time. So it is definitely a manipulative tactic that is used in the space of relationship, because we view relationship as another form of hustling. So we'll hustle a person that we're in relationship with, thinking that I'm going to come out on top no matter what. And that is a very dangerous game. But I also want to transition, because the other side of that, and I started to tap into it, I had to stop. The other side of it is trauma dumping. So how can I recognize when someone is trauma dumping, or even me trauma dumping, versus co-creating emotional safety? I'm gonna need you to do the tag team thing.
There's not reciprocation.
Okay.
Right. I think that's one, right? So if how can one recognize when they're trauma dumping versus co-creating emotional safety? I think that there is one, like, it's one-sided, right? And then there's always there's some controlling behavior, I believe, as well. So I think that, yeah, I'll just stop right there.
I'm gonna write that down because I'm gonna come back to it in a second.
I agree with the voice of reason, also that control thing. But I also thought about trauma dumping is when they're constantly holding you in light to their past failed relationships. And it's almost anything you do, it triggers them, causing them to say, or to even just, even respond without verbally communicating that your behavior reminded me of the last person or the person before that. And again, to the voice of reason's point of, then they move into a space of control to make sure that you do not trigger them. And so, I mean, I think there's a few things that's connected to trauma dumping. But when we reflect back on that chemistry piece, we'll overlook it and say, oh, that's just him. You know, we're getting to know each other. And I understand, even in the space of getting to know each other, I understand that. But then at what point does the trauma dumping stop? Because I've heard years ago, and I do believe, however you start your relationship off with an individual, and again, this is any relationship, and you never corrected them, moving into a more the word done left my mind, moving into a more committed relationship, many people, including myself, have deceived themselves into thinking something's going to change. No, you just gave them a license to keep trauma dumping. And now you're in this committed relationship, and the trauma dumping continues. And Coach, you said early in this live that now you're like, do I stay or I leave? And unfortunately, many of us feel, well, I've already invested even as much as 6 months or as little as 6 months. Well, I've invested 6 months, and, you know, we keep wishing and hoping that, well, maybe in the next 6 months, he or she will change. No, you just gave them a license to continue with that behavior. And so we have to, I think that this is a great question of, with the co-creating emotional safety. I don't think most of us even heard of it. This is my first time hearing it in the way that you've worded it. But I love it because it now opens me up to, okay, what is co-creating emotional safety? To me, that means we both should be investing in creating an emotional safety net, if you will, where, you know, we can both have that vulnerability and feel safe to be vulnerable. That's kind of where my mindset is.
I love that. I love that. I do want to back up just a little bit because I heard two things and I love both of them. The first thing I heard was reciprocity, and the second thing I heard was past failed relationships. Now let's talk reciprocity first, because what I've learned over the years is that most of us don't understand what reciprocity is. So when we talk about how can one recognize when they're trauma dumping versus co-creating emotional safety? At least I think, Elisa, it was you who mentioned reciprocity. What does reciprocity look like when it comes down to co-creating emotional safety?
I think I want to start here. What is not is not one-sided pressure, right? That's not what reciprocity is. Reciprocity is not, I need you to expose yourself immediately to me, because then if that happens, I think there's an indication where a person may try to be manipulative and you can't really move forward, or you should see signs, right? But reciprocity builds trust with each other, because I think there's a lot of times we forget that we're one. I think there's something that we talked about in one of our other reframing the images of relationship, right? That we're one. So what affects the other, if we're in a covenant relationship and we're married, right? So if one person does something that's offensive, then it's the whole that is affected by it, right? So reciprocity in this particular aspect, I believe that if we're not focused on making sure that we are one and we're working and we're in, as you say, oftentimes lockstep with each other to make sure that we are going forward and we're fulfilling our purpose, then I think that helps us to be mindful of the reciprocity. Now, I will say this as well, because there's order, right? Reciprocity may not be 50-50. I'm going to add that. Okay. So reciprocity may not be 50-50, but it is still 100% because it's the whole, and it helps, and it affects the whole, and it helps the whole when we are aligned and we are doing it together. So I'll stop there.
Young lady, that was the piece I was looking for. That last piece you just said, it may not be 50-50. That's the part I'm talking about when I say most of us don't understand reciprocity. Just because you do a thing a particular way does not necessarily mandate that my reciprocal response is to do it the exact same way that you do it. Me having a response, though, is reciprocal. That's the issue we run into. We get into this competitive nature of comparing ourselves to each other like we're not in relationship. Like you said just now, we are one. So if there is an action, then there should be a reaction. And if there's an action, there should be a reaction. That is reciprocity. Again, it's not doing the exact same things. So we got to get out of the habit. And I just use this as an example. If she is the more emotionally expressive one, then recognize how he expresses his emotions before you compare how you express emotions to his, and then tell him that he is emotionally disconnected. That's incorrect. We just express emotions different. That is reciprocal of one another. Sister Novella, you made mention of past failed relationships, one of my favorite topic and talking points, right? How do I know? And this is the key. How do I know when it's time for me to pack my bags and go? And I'm asking this because if that person is just constantly dumping, the fact that what they've been through and how this happened and whatever the case may be, and I've seen this before and so forth, how do I know when it's time to go?
So let me be transparent. So I started seeing a guy, and he started off real nice and everything. And, we went to dinner, we chatted up, very good conversation. Going back to that chemistry thing, right? I was like, okay, I'm seeing some real strong potential here. So as we continue to talk, I noticed a lot of negativity in his responses during conversations. And I'm like, where did that come from? And this started kind of snowballing, if you will, because it started happening in every conversation, whether we was on the phone or whether we was out to eat. And I'm like, that's not what you showed me the first time we went, to have lunch. And so I was like, Nodella, are you overanalyzing? Are you overthinking? Are your expectations realistic? Because I can be very demanding, And so I had to examine myself. I said, let me not be, also irrational and say, you know what, I'm done. I said, let me check me first. And I began to look at me. And so it reached a point to where I was afraid to talk, because I'm like, it was almost every time I said something, it was a trigger, and he would flip his lid. And I'm like, okay. And to your point, I don't do that physical stuff. Don't put your hands on me. We don't do that. Let's just separate if it comes to that. And so I became fearful of him, to where I didn't even want to go out anywhere with him, because let's be honest, people see people, being physically abused, and instead of them intervening, they start videotaping and streaming to social media. So I didn't feel any safer publicly. And I just had to look at that. And so the straw that broke the camel back was, I asked him a question because I'm trying to get to know him and just kind of understand him. He lost it. He didn't cuss me out but he just flipped with profanity. And y'all know how I feel about that. And so I'm like, you know what? I sent him a text message. I said, listen, you need to get into some serious counseling. I said, you need to get over what it is that's causing you to react this way. And I'm like, I'm out. I'm out. And I wasn't going back. When I say I'm out, I'm gone, and there is no return unless the Lord tells me, which I knew that wasn't going to happen. And I was like, I was out. So the straw that broke the camel back. So we're now talking 3 months later. And some of you may say, well, that's not a lengthy period of time. Listen, I don't believe in spending a lot of my precious time that I cannot get back on something that is not going to pan out in the long run. When I saw by month 3, this behavior continued. Now, I could have continued to say, well, you know, things will get better. I knew it wasn't, because it was getting worse. And so I said, I'm out. And I haven't been in contact with him. Well, he texted me one time. He was like, we good? I'm like, we good. It wasn't personal in the context that if I see you, I'll never speak to you again. I just recognized that we were not a fit for each other. I was not her. And I said, we good. So if I see him today, I'm like, hey, how you doing? And keep it moving. But to reconnect, no.
Yeah. There's a couple of things I heard there. And I think Nick D and his divine appointment is spot on with that. Generally, for and if you guys have never heard me say this, you know, I'll say it. I'm about to say it again. Every person is a combination of 3 people, right? In other words, and it doesn't, I don't care who you are or how great you think you are, there are 3 people working inside of you at the exact same time. Sometimes what we struggle with, and well, let me go back and tell you who the 3 people are. You have the core of who you are, which is the hardest person to change. That person incorporates a majority of your upbringing and some of the most unresolved past experiences that you've ever had. Then you got the person that you really want to be. That's the person that you desire to grow into, and so forth and so on. And then you have the person that you believe the environment is requesting that you be. This is why you go to work and you hear somebody. This is why, like, you go to work and a friend of yours in a work environment looks totally different than you know, you've seen them outside of work. Or say, for example, you're married or whatever, and they pick up the phone like, hello, thank you for calling the you know what I'm saying? It's like, wait, who is this person? They're code switching because they're being the person that they believe the environment is requesting to be. Well, that's what happened a lot of times in relationship. The person that you're meeting is a mask. It's the facade that they're putting on because that's the person they believe that you need them to be in that moment. That's why I keep trying to say, stop telling men what y'all want in a man, because the only thing they're going to do is put the suit on and be just that in that moment. You're giving them the answers to the test before you even give them the test to take. Doesn't make sense. And then we get upset because, well, you know, I thought it was perfect. Sure you did, because you told him how to be perfect. Duh. But anyway, everybody's plight in life is to take these 3 people and line them up so that they can become identical. I'll say it again. Everybody's plight in life is to take these 3 people and line them up so they can become identical across the board. So when you look at who they are at work, they're the exact same thing. When you look at, I'm sorry, Crystal. When you look at who they are at work, they're the exact same person. When you look at who they are around their family, they're the exact same person. When you look at who they are around their coworkers, they're the exact same person, because they have found a way to make all 3 of them see the same picture when it comes down to this thing called existence. So that's one of the biggest things that I heard. And I think that can be an issue. That's a huge issue, because you don't know who you're getting in relationship with in the beginning. That's why I always say, stop trying to rush to the finish line, because a lot of y'all are marrying mannequins. The person who you thought they were, that's not who they were. And then after Beyonce didn't tell y'all to convince that person to put a ring on it, now you stuck like Chuck. So that's just it. So I thank you, both of you, for sharing that, because I think there was a lot in that. And here's the funny part about it. We only got through trigger 1. So now it's time to dive into trigger number 2. And trigger number 2 is all about the narrative resonance, right? The notion here is that deeper chemistry forms when you jointly script your story. Look at it as though like the both of you are explorers trying to build something that's timeless. But here's the issue: relationships tend to crumble when these stories clash. Your version of reality looks different than my version of reality. And statistically speaking, 68% of people never align their stories, leading to conflicting expectation. So, that's my soulmate. I've been looking for this person my whole life, but like I said, you gave him the answers to the test, so he is just being your soulmate for the time being. And I'm being harsh on that regard because that's the story that's most easily shared in the social media spaces. But trust and believe, it looks the exact same way on the other side. Yeah, I cook. Yeah, I clean. I take good care of my man until they get in the house. Man, you ain't cooked nothing all week, all month. Do you even know how to cook rice? Listen, no joke, not joking. Some people don't know how to cook rice. That's a bad thing. So listen. The first question here: when two people script conflicting stories, meaning that their version of relationship is totally different, whose narrative wins and at what cost?
I don't think anybody's narrative is going to win, because if anybody in that relationship has any sense, yeah, you need, as somebody posted, you need to find the nearest exit, because as you put, soulmates versus casual. One thing I never do is I've never done is say, oh, this is my soulmate, because I don't think we have a fuller enough or a full enough understanding of what does it mean to even be somebody's soulmate. We're focused on soulmate again just from the fleshly aspect, but as believers we know there's more to soulmate than just the flesh. And so my personal opinion, I would say nobody's narrative would win if somebody came to their senses and says, you know what, I'm looking for my soulmate. And in prime example, even back to that movie last night, the girl was looking for her soulmate, but the guy she'd been in a relationship for 7 years, he was casual. So at the end of it all, she ended up letting the relationship go. And again, because why? She came, unfortunately, it took her 7 years, but I give her kudos. She did eventually come to her senses of saying, you know what? I want commitment. He wants casual. So somebody has to win. And I say at the end of that, nobody won because she broke the relationship off.
Lisa?
Okay. So I think that there is a time when we have to be honest, and it's not fantasy. So when two people script conflicting stories, whose narrative wins and at what cost? And I agree with Ms. Nodella that when when there is conflicting scripts, then nobody wins, because they're making it about each individual and not about the ruling authority. And to me, that is the word of God, right? So if we are coming into a relationship and we're fixed with our narrative, right, then no one is going to win. And I think when you agree and you have open conversations and there's expectations, even to the point where it can risk you it being uncomfortable, I think that is a place that we should all desire to be. Be transparent, even if it's uncomfortable. Be honest, because why not? Why not have that information that you need to make an informed decision? Why run from that? Because are you allowing the thing that you want to overrule everything else? So why not get an understanding? With all that getting, get an understanding. Why not do that? Well, a lot of times that's because we're selfish and we believe that we can do something different than God can't. We can change the individual. and that individual has to do the work themselves. So I think that when we enter into something with these scripts that we have already fixed in our mind, that no one wins, because we're not allowing God to come in and teach us what he wants to teach us, because he is the one who orchestrated relationships. And so, and he's teaching us how to be in relationship with each other.
Yeah, I agree that nobody wins, but I think somebody does win, and that's the enemy, because he comes to kill, steal, and destroy.
Yeah.
And if he can destroy the progressive nature of this relationship in the beginning, before it actually gets started, then it does not have a high probability of hope of making it through turbulent times. All it takes is one. I mean, one, what they used to call back in the day, knockdown, drag out. I'm not talking about fisticuff. I'm talking about a situation that could be so profound that it really disturbs the core of an individual. All it takes is that, and then you're pretty much guaranteed to go your separate ways. But I also want to look at it and ask this question moving forward. If, and we talked about the 68% earlier, if aligning on shared relationship stories prevent the 68% confusion rate, why does society reject this wise counsel?
Well, the question is what got us in this situation from the giddy up? Yeah, I went old school on that one. What got us in this situation from the giddy up? Our flesh and desire to want to have somebody, no matter the cost, until you realize what the cost is, and that it's a bit more than what you was willing to pay. And so when we focus more on me, as we talked about, that selfish flesh is so selfish. You are going to reject wise counsel because it's all about you. And if the counsel is not in your favor, I don't need it.
I have two scriptures to share. Without counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counsel, they are established. Can two walk together except they agree? And so when I think about this, right, I think about wisdom, right? In a It's something that it's planned, and we proceed with caution. We're mindful, we're observing, and we're honest about the problem, right? And I think that's what it takes. Again, it takes us to be transparent. It takes us to be honest, and make sure that we're following the instructions that are there and available for us, right? How can two walk together except they be in agreement? So I think that is a part of it that we have to be mindful of. So we're in the relationship together, right? And if we're in covenant relationship together, then that means that our focus is going to be on the covenant and not our individual desires. I wanted to add that as well.
Yeah, I like that. I like both points. Um, I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off the wound right now. I don't think that's what people want. I don't really. I don't. I am almost convinced, not thoroughly, but I'm almost convinced that everybody does not want healthy relationship. I think there's a large group of people out there that wants the manipulative relationship. I want someone that I can control, have them do what I want them to do when I want them to do it. I really do believe that that's where we are in this world. It's a sad state of affairs, if I'm being honest. I just, I find it very difficult to understand how so many can flock to conversations that are all about non-cohesive existence, to where you can listen to the conversations, and those conversations are all about control, manipulation, domineering. But yet you'll have conversations, kind of like conversations like this, to where we're trying to help people understand that there's a better way to exist in relationship. Your relationship may be even good, but is it possible that good can be the enemy of great? And because you're complacent with good, you're rejecting great? And so that's kind of like what I believe. I believe the creator of relationship has given you the best blueprint to exist in the
Yeah.
space of relationship. But I also believe that I've also believed that a lot of self-centered people are rejecting that because I'm comfortable where I am. I like doing what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's a very sad state of affairs. But I'm just being honest based upon my observations. Am I the only person that sees that? Do you guys see that too?
No, I do. I mean, I am hearing the individualism, right, that comes with the mindset of people who want to enter into relationships today. And it's like, I have this degree, or I have this house, or I have this money, so it has to be my way. This is what I want, and this is how it is going to be. Not we're coming together for purpose, and we're going to walk together as one, but I have to be in control because I don't want to be hurt, and I want to be able to control the situation. So I can't be vulnerable with you because my outcome, I'm already determining that it's going to fail. So we're walking into a relationship with a mindset of failure because I'm not going to do the work to make sure that this is a sustainable relationship. I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm not going to be honest with you and truthful when we have these discussions. I'm going to put up airs. I'm not going to be transparent. So all these things are a part of the mindset when we're entering into a relationship. And as you said, God has already given us some instructions. Now we go seek them and find them. They will pop right out to us because He is teaching us in the moment. It took me a long that's a whole bunch of O's and L's time to understand this. It wasn't something that I always knew, but I wanted to know more, and I wanted God to help me to understand. So it takes you taking the time, and trust me, it's available. This is why I love these conversations that we have, because now the questions that are asked makes you unpack, makes you seek, helps you to understand what's God's purpose, what's His will for us to be in relationship. And so that's why I love these conversations, because it requires you to understand His will and purpose. And His will and purpose is the best way. But when we don't see that examined, when we see the 68 or 70% all the time, and that's how people are doing it, and then we want to talk about divorce rates, and that's because we're not doing it the right way. And you see thousands of people in these conversations, especially if you go on TikTok, there's thousands of people in this conversation, and there's so much dysfunction. It's so much wrong teaching. And that's what people are flocking to because they're itching ears. That's what they want to hear. But when you come to a place where you have to, it can't be about you, but it has to be about us. It has to be about we. Then we don't want to have the conversation because that does not make me the person who's going to be in control.
Yeah, I like that. And one other thing I want to add, um, I'm an advocate of teaching in the home, according to the Bible. I'm an advocate of that. I am also an advocate of the man should be teaching in the home, but I'm more of an advocate of both people should be reading in the home. So even in the midst of that, and I think some people they prefer it. And again, just my thoughts. And I'm just saying this because of what Lisa just said. When we talk, we should be talking about different things that we read, right? You shouldn't be waiting on me to come to you and say, okay, let me tell you what I read and this is what I got. It shouldn't be that way. We both should do our own reading. Then we should come together and talk about that. I think that's the best way to do it. Because if we don't do that, what ends up happening is that one person will read and then go tell the other person what they should be doing. That's not the way to go. I should be reading so I can understand what I need to do and then do that. Because again, that's where my expectation lies in this relationship. She should be reading and understanding what she is supposed to be doing and then do that. And then then we become accountability partners for each other. Because when I step out of line, she now has the authority to say, "Hey, let me holler at you real quick because that's unlike you. Let's talk about this and see how did we get here and how can we move forward together in that." So I just wanted to add that to it, because I think again a lot of pockets of resistance exist. Bad teaching begets bad teaching begets bad teaching begets bad teaching, and so you may get this part right, but then this part may be stuck and stuck here. Or you may get these two parts right, but you're stuck here because of some bad teaching that you received previously. So I just want to share that. I love this conversation. I'm loving everything you guys put in the chat. I do see it. Please keep it coming. I'm not ignoring you, but we're getting kind of close on time here. And we got one more. I got two more points, one more trigger that we need to touch on. And so that kind of takes us to trigger number 3, which is called pro-social alignment. Sparks survive when you share a mission bigger than your relationship. Something along the lines of faith, justice, and creativity. Chemistry dies, though, when goals misalign. Statistically speaking, 77% of breakups cite drifting visions. I know I have marriage and versus casual here, but I'm talking about the vehicle that takes you to the creative end in that regard. So I just want to make sure that I understand that we all understand and separate the difference. So that said, do you believe in your heart of hearts that society pushes us to prioritize attraction over purpose? If so, what are the dangers behind doing so?
I mean, all of your statistical analysis that you shared today points to this very thing, and that everything, it continues to point towards individualism, but yet you're supposed to be in a covenanted or committed relationship. There is no individualism in a committed, covenanted relationship from the perspective of when we're looking at, purpose, for example. This is something that I'm working on, within my own ministry, is that understanding what purpose really means. My purpose that has been assigned by God is not all about me. My purpose, more than it's more for the people than it is in me. It is for me. Let me say that again. When we understand what purpose really is, it's more about others than ourselves. We are actually just, if you will, the conduit or the vessel that is being used. When it comes to God, that's how it works. I have a specific purpose in this life. And each and every one of us, that's, each of my co-panelists and those of you who is in the chat on social media, we all have been called to a specific purpose. But again, it's not about us. It's about other people. If we don't understand what purpose really means, then we're not going to be able to walk, as you just talked about, Coach, when we're in that committed relationship, or if you're married, because some people just, when you're in that committed relationship or marriage, you recognize that first and foremost, there's only one vision for that house. Now, saying there's only one vision for that house doesn't mean that he won't still have his own work and she still won't have her own work, but your individual works does not pull you apart, because you recognize with what each of you are doing separately, it all funnels into that one vision. And so when we allow society to teach us, and even in some cases dictate to us, this is who we are, this is our identity, and this is how we should be doing things as believers, we should not be allowing social media to do that. You're not going to live successfully as a believer, and then you're also allowing social media to tell you X, Y, and Z. There is a major conflict, and this is what we are seeing when it comes to relationships. And so your question is, do you believe that society pushes us to prioritize attraction over purpose? Okay, let's look at the fact, and I'm going to yield the mic at this point. Let's look at the fact of all these cosmetic enhancements that men, listen, I know y'all see a lot about women, but I saw one special interview where the guy didn't like the fact that he was short. So he went and paid all this money to have his legs lengthened. So it's not just women who's doing, yeah. And he's actually a celebrity who did it. I forgot his name. So it's not just women who's doing these physical enhancements. Men are also. There's more men out here who's wearing toupees that you would never know that he's wearing a toupee, because these barber skills have increased, so significantly to where you couldn't even tell. So we're talking about prioritizing attraction over purpose. We're seeing it all the time. The visual of you got to look the part more than actually being the part.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a lot when you think about it, right? When you think about all the influences, and the question is, do you believe that society pushes us to prioritize attraction over purpose? And if so, what are the dangers behind doing so? So I think that it leaves out us being obedient to the covenant relationship that God had in store for us. I don't think there's anything with being romantic in relationship, but that can't be everything. There's service that's going to be required. There's going to be there's so many other things that add to us being in relationship. And if we're making romance okay, I'm going to be very transparent right here, right? So intimacy lasts for a moment, but then what else after? What you going to do those other 24 hours? I'm just saying, what are you going to do? How are you going to be connected?
23 hours and 45 minutes.
Okay. Shut up.
I'm sorry, my bad. I'm being petty. You know what I'm saying?
I'm just saying. So then what comes then, right? What comes after that? How are we going to be able to connect? How are we going to be able to sustain ourselves if that's the foundation of us being in relationship? So when we prioritize our mission and our purpose coming together, and how we serve each other, how we are committed to the kingdom, and how we're building relationships, and how it's not just about chemistry. And so those are the things that I think that if we don't take the time to think into, the end result is showing us what the end result is going to be. It's not going to be success.
It is it's a money grab if we can't see it. That's what the prioritizing attraction is all about. I'm still stuck on the elongation surgery. I never knew that you can have a surgery to make yourself taller. That sounds painful, prolonged painful over time, but that's a whole nother conversation. So the height surgery, the hair pieces, the eyelashes, all of the enhancements, all of it's for money. That's all it is. It is an industry that literally implants these things in your head to make you believe that it will make you more attractive, therefore this XYZ. And on the backside, they're creating the product that they're advertising for you and testing the market where you live to see how you respond to the advertisement. It is marketing 101. And if you can't see it, it's only because you're not looking at it, probably because you can't see the forest for the trees. You're in it. You're participating in it. You're doing it. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand other things, medical needs, so forth and so on. That's totally different than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just like them butterflies that people like to put on their eyes. Not cute. Sorry. I'm just,
Windshield
yeah,
wipers.
well, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not picking at nobody. I'm just saying most of us don't like it. We don't like it. I'm just telling you the truth. But I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole because somebody might pop my balloon. I'm sorry. I think that's the dumbest show on the planet. But anyway, that's my opinion. That's my opinion. Yeah, it's bad. It is bad altogether. It takes away from me learning who you really are. You know what I'm saying? That's the thing that we're missing. All of these things kind of creates another layer to discern in the midst of the get to know you thing, right? You guys seen that what was it? I'm gonna get you sucker movie long time ago. Right, exactly. See, I don't even have to say it
I
because
knew you was going there. I knew you.
I'm just but listen, that's real though. You know what I'm saying? And they made an extreme example out of it. And I was laughing for days when I first seen it. But that is reality. Like you don't know the person, like really know the person. And I'm not saying the extensions or the accents. That's what I meant. I'm not saying the accents are the person, but there's a reason why the accents exist. And so when I understand the reason why the accents exist, that gets me closer to knowing the person. And there lies the danger because it's another layer that stands in between me and the authentic version of you. And again, now no judgment. I'm just looking at the secondary and tertiary effects. Sure, it may get you cat calls walking down the street, buddy with the height surgery. People may look at, oh, you 6'1". I thought you was 5'7" last week. Maybe, but who knows? So
I
I think,
wouldn't. I wouldn't advise him to play basketball.
yeah,
Let
I
me stop.
wouldn't.
See,
I
you
would
was
advise nobody
playing
to
with
do
your.
it. That's just like I think we got to get to the point of recognizing that the creator did not make a mistake when he created you. So why do I feel like I need to go and perfect what the creator had already made? Do you not understand that your imperfections lead to you understanding the perfectness of you? That you were created perfectly imperfect. Be okay with the version of you that exists because that is the uniqueness of you. Stop trying to be like everybody else externally, looking like everybody else. Oh, well, this person got this. I'm gonna go get that too. That's bad. Yeah, you're right. There you go. Super messy. Super messy. So I just kind of want to share that real quick because I just it really gets under my skin. I'm gonna skip that question and go to the last section because I really want to get after this one. And this one is kind of going back to what the voice of reason mentioned previously, from sparks to covenant, rewiring your relational code. And I think when we really stop and think about this in its entirety, we need to get to the point of replacing transactional chemistry. Do they make me feel good? To covenant chemistry. Do they call me higher? I'll say that part again. Transactional chemistry. Do they make me feel good? To covenant chemistry. Do they call me higher? Your mate should be challenging you to elevate. If you're with someone that's not challenging you to elevate, and I'm not talking toxic challenge either. I'm not talking about threats and dares and if you don't do this, I'm leaving. No, hurry up, go then. You know what I'm saying? That's my advice to a person who talks like that. If that's what they go, bye, hurry up. But I'm talking about a person that is speaking into you. And for those of you who are understanding what I'm saying, a man needs a woman that speaks into his hey. And you got to understand what hey means when I say that. And I don't have enough time to explain it right now. Um, First Corinthians 13:7 actually says, love always protects, trusts, hopes, and preserves. We have to understand that true love is a choice, not a chemical accident. And so I want us to kind of look at this question. Is chemistry just a distraction from the more challenging work of covenant connection, or is chemistry the foundation? Or I add an additional piece. Can it possibly be? Because I know somebody was going to ask this question. Somebody's in the background, and I promise you, they're saying, well, why can't I have both? So for that person, can it be both?
All right, so leave the question up. So you're asking, is chemistry just a distraction from the more challenging work of covenant connection. It is for those who are not interested in a covenant connection. It is for those who are just about casual, having a casual relationship. Chemistry can be the foundation, but I believe that only comes with someone who's in a place of maturity and also know that they want a covenantal connection or covenantal relationship. So although I know at the beginning we talked about and we kind of beat up chemistry, right, a little bit a few questions back, but putting it in this new perspective, chemistry has its place. Let us remember, everything has its place in our life. The problem / question / thought is our ability to put those things in their right place. And so chemistry is being misused, just like narcissists, just like all this other stuff. It's being abused because people have misplaced it. Again, chemistry has a place. The question is, where does it go? Many of us don't know where chemistry goes. We put it in the front, and again, that's fine, right? That's okay. But it should not be the leading factor when looking for that covenant connection. You now need to move chemistry to maybe in the middle, because you're at a place of discovering more about each other than chemistry. Then once you get to that point, chemistry should be moved back to the line a little bit more. So it can't, again, I believe it has its place, but we need to make sure that as the relationship progresses, that chemistry needs to be no longer leading or in the forefront. It needs to find its place. And this can be a whole nother conversation, because I can kind of take that and just do a whole nother conversation. But hopefully that was clear enough to help us to understand that I believe it is both. And again, just simply understanding where chemistry goes in the relationship, just like pretty much anything else, we have to start looking at where do these different components go. They may start off in the beginning. It may not need to be in the beginning. It may need to come in the middle, or it may come a little bit later in the relationship. So as we talked about as well, we have to do the work that many people don't want to do, because in doing the work, that means you will not be married more than likely in 6 months. Not if you're going to do the real work. You may have to wait another year and a half, another 2 years, if you're going to put in the work. But I say lastly is that however long it took for me, let's just say if I met a guy in 6 months and we felt we made that connection, we've done the necessary work, and after 6 months we're ready to get married, that's what works for us. That's the other setup. You cannot govern your relationships based on mine. For you, you may need a year and a half, possibly 2 years, depending on the two of you in that relationship. And I'll land there.
I really did. I like this question, and I dug deep into this one. But the thing that comes to mind is covenant faithfulness requires both love and affection, right? And obedience. So it requires us to be obedient. If you love me, keep my commandments, right? And so when we view chemistry, there was a concept that I was looking at to view it as either a signpost and not a compass. So it lets you it points you toward a question about character, faith, and shared purposes, right? So when you think about the signpost, right, the signpost is almost like the chemistry is you're using the chemistry as your guide, all right? So and it points you towards something to consider, direction, that this may be something that I want to pursue even further, right? And so it helps you to make sure that you're asking questions, and then you're pausing to examine your path, right? Then continue only when there's alignment that you can identify there's alignment. But the compass is the chemistry as your sole guide. That's what you're using. The chemistry as my sole guide. So it sets its own direction and it determines the entire course if you're allowing it to be a compass, chemistry to be a compass to make your decisions. So it trumps other factors. It does not consider life goals. It doesn't consider faith. And it only leads you to following feelings regardless of reality. So when I use those two ideals, either is chemistry a signpost or is it a compass? So it's a signpost. That's where we should stop and look at the directions that we need to go and take other things into consideration and not allow the compass to be our only goal.
Sorry about that. I love both perspectives because I'm actually agreeing with you. I think it can be both. I think the issue is that we need to go into the lab, fire the chemists that are in the lab, replace those chemists with chemists that are Holy Spirit driven. Those chemists now only allow me to be attracted to people who are attracted to him. But I'm not attracted from an external perspective. I'm attracted from a character and behavioral perspective. So now that attraction is now that connection is now in line with what I believe, and we believe the same thing. And then of course y'all know my motto, like you can't even get in a car unless you can help me carry the bucket. So it's like, that is that thing to me that matters. And I think a lot of people miss that piece. So greatly appreciate everything you guys said. Greatly appreciate you guys for sticking in with us. I kind of want to just go over the points again, not the questions, because I think this is important. So remember, the concern is what we hope versus the reality gap, right? And then after that, the first trigger was mirrored vulnerability. The second trigger was narrative resonance. And the third trigger is pro-social alignment. And again, we got to get to the point to where we can move from sparks to covenant, and where we get to the point of rewiring our relational code. So that said, greatly appreciate everything that you guys said. But as always, this is the bittersweet moment, which takes us into our final thoughts. And Miss Nodella is going to be the one that starts us off.
I truly enjoyed today's conversation. And I want us to remember that we have to make space and room when establishing or desiring any kind of relationship, whether it's romantic, whether it's platonic, whether it's friendship, or even worship in amongst family. There's always going to require some kind of work if you want that relationship to work and if you want that relationship to last. There is no such thing as a perfect relationship, and definitely not without any kind of work. We don't get to wave a magic wand and everything is perfect or everything is in place or the way that we want it to be. We have to do the work, and we cannot be afraid to do the work. Think about all of your previous relationships that did not work out. And again, this is not just for the romantic relationships. This is platonic, friendship, and familyship. Can you find yourself where you did not put in the work and they were putting in all of the work? We recognize that it takes two people to make a relationship work successfully, not just for one, but for both. And as we say here in the community, the relationship is the most important part or the most important person in a relationship. And when we focus on the relationship rather than ourselves, then we can definitely head towards a closer to having a perfect relationship.
Thank you. I have truly enjoyed this, and there's so much that we didn't get to, but I enjoyed learning and God teaching me even the more. And so, if I could leave anything with anyone, I would leave these 4 point, well, maybe 5 points. Right? Lead with virtue. Okay, in integrity, gentleness, self control, and humility. Um, Seek discernment, and that's wisdom through scriptures and prayer and counsel, and ground your decisions in covenant values, sharing your faith and your mission, your willingness to pursue holiness together, and practical and practice healthy vulnerability, reciprocal trust built over time with boundaries and safety. That's important. You may not think that safety is important, but as we begin to listen to each other and have conversations and unpack the things that are going to help us to be healthy and have a lasting relationship, um, talking about the boundaries and making sure that we're safe in that environment. I know Coach doesn't like that word safe, but that's the word that comes to me right now, right? And then honest storytelling. Ensure your relationship narrative aligns with truth. Be honest. It's not a fantasy, it's truth. Align it with truth. And I think these are some of the ingredients that can help us to sustain a healthy, lasting relationship, and it requires us to work. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna come on down because I'm not gonna leave any final thoughts. I think they said everything that's need to be said. One thing I will tell you is like if you want to go deeper into these types of conversations, click on that link and see what we actually offer in the community. I think it'll be awesome. I think, in my opinion, and this is just how I see it, if I had training on relationship before getting into a relationship, I believe I would have been better suited for a relationship. And one of the worst things that we do in our community is we equate tenure with something that's good. I believe there's a lot of people out there existing in spaces of relationship that have been there for years, but they're simply coping with somebody else's toxic behavior. So I just kind of want to leave that out there. Listen, greatly appreciate you guys. You guys are awesome. If you hadn't hit that like button yet, go ahead and hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And again, don't forget to click on that link because I think that link can actually teach you something about yourself. And again, there's nothing wrong with learning more about yourself. There's nothing wrong with learning more together. That's something that should be the norm in like just our community overall. We should be learning relationship together before getting into that deeper level of relationship. So enjoy the rest of your Saturday. If you didn't know Georgia play at 3:30 today, that's where I would be. Don't call me because I'm not answering my phone. Listen, I love you guys. Be awesome. Let the best version of yourself be a blessing to somebody else, and we'll see you next month.